William McCrea.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to see you occupy the Speaker's chair, and I wish you great wisdom as you give leadership to this House. I'd like to thank my colleagues for putting down this motion at a time whenever many of our fellow citizens are gathering together with my right honourable friend and Member of Parliament for North Belfast to remember the tragedy in the Shankill bombing 20 years ago today. On that day, many innocent lives were lost because of the atrocity committed by the Provisional IRA. I also acknowledge that Dr. Richard Haas and Professor Megan O'Sullivan have been given the task of seeking a way forward on a number of important issues that have divided our community for years. I know this House wishes them well in their endeavours. However, today my colleagues and I believe that there are issues that cannot be airbrushed out of existence, as some would wish, as if they never happened, nor must we let Sinn Féin and their Republican fellow travellers rewrite the narrative of our troubled past in Northern Ireland. Can I pay tribute to the thousands of men and women who donned the uniform and stood in the gap between community and anarchy throughout the long years of IRA terror? Those soldiers who patrolled the roads of Ulster over the years, alongside the RUC, the RUCR, GC, USC, UDR, RUR, doing so with valour and distinction. They rightly deserve our deep gratitude, having faced gangsters and thugs who reigned over 30 years of terror on a law-abiding population. We must never forget the sacrifice of our security forces and their bravery. Also, we must never forget the sacrifice of their families, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, who anxiously waited, hoping their loved ones would return home safely. And alas, many of them didn't. The deep sense of loss still felt in the hearts of many innocent victims of violence across our province today is raw, and no one except those who have walked this dark and lonely path can understand the pain. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, this anguish is made worse by the coat-trailing exercises of the Republican movement and Sinn Féin in particular over recent months. The leader of my party has on many occasions gone out on a limb, seeking to reach the hand of friendship to nationalists, Republicans, in an effort to build a stronger community spirit, give the generations to come a better future, a prosperous province of which we all can be proud. But sadly, many Sinn Féin representatives just cannot leave their field past, whilst others pretend they have. That is, of course, until the mask slips. Oh yes, some of the politicians speak piously of a shared future, but in reality the proof is they cannot bear to see orange feet walk the Queen's Highway. They cannot even share a road in Belfast or Portadown for a few minutes to allow a small contingent of Orangemen to walk home after a day when Protestants celebrate their culture. The reality is, when you scrape beneath the surface, you find that the old leopard hasn't in reality changed his spots. As Mr Robinson sought to build a peaceful future, Sinn Féin representatives like Jerry Kelly defied the law by hanging on to police Land Rovers in North Belfast, and on another occasion celebrated the escape from the Mace prison in which a prison officer was murdered. Sinn Féin coat-trailed through Castlederg and North Belfast, lauding as heroes those who blew themselves up with their own bombs, leaving a trail of innocent blood across this province. Today, people gather to remember the slaughter of the innocent on the Shankill. But no world attention will be focused on this event, of course. They were only Protestants, innocent men, women and children, slaughtered by the blatantly sectarian IRA. In reality, the authorities here on the mainland, as well as international governments, have granted favoured status to those who murdered and maimed, whilst the law-abiding people of Northern Ireland were left to suffer, and then told, just simply move on. The Prime Minister made an apology to the families in Londonderry. The media spent hours of airtime propagating one single event in the history of our province, just as if nobody else had endured any injustice over the years of turmoil and trouble. No apology has been given to the law-abiding Unionist majority for the years that they were plagued with IRA terrorism. I have no doubt our security forces were well able to crush these terrorists, but political expedience would not allow them to do so. We are expected and were expected to suffer in silence while world leaders kowtowed to and wined and dined Adams and McGuinness. Over the years, I have wept and comforted many families of innocent victims and carried in my heart deep wounds because of what the IRA have done. However, if we allow hatred and bitterness to take over our lives, then we destroy ourselves and we allow the enemy a victory over us. Madam Deputy Speaker, the IRA were terrorists. They formed as an organisation with the aim of removing the British from Northern Ireland and bringing about the unification of Ireland by force. It was doomed to fail, not because the government of the day stood up for the rights of the people, but because tens of thousands of ordinary people determined to remain part of the United Kingdom and exercise their democratic right accordingly. Don't forget, ministers from the Fianna Fáil governing party in the Irish Republic diverted funds intended as emergency aid to illegally import weapons directly for the Provost. Surely it is time for the unreserved apology from the Prime Minister of the Irish Republic for the actions of a former government who helped to spawn and support IRA terrorist gangs. An apology from the Irish Republic's government would certainly go some distance to ensure that Unionist community that the pain of the innocent victims of terror has been recognised. How long will we have to wait for such an apology? I don't know, but of course time will tell. The Provisional IRA were responsible for the deaths of 1,706 people up to 2001. 479 civilian casualties, 183 members of the UDR, 455 came from the regiment of the British Army, 271 were members of the RUC. Of the IRA victims, 340 were Northern Ireland Roman Catholics, 794 were Northern Ireland Protestants, 572 were not from Northern Ireland. The University of Ulster also stated that the IRA lost 276 members during the Troubles. However, in 132 of those cases, IRA members either caused their own deaths as a result of hunger strikes, premature bombing accidents, or so on, or were murdered due to allegations of having worked for the security forces. Let me put the record straight in this House. The IRA was not fighting a just war, but through bombings, assassinations, kidnappings, punishment, beatings of civilians, tortures, extortions, robberies, racketeerings and so on, it forced successive British governments into endless concessions. Those who were involved in terrorism should be called terrorists and must not be granted a similar status to those they terrorised, irrespective of what part of the community they come from. The IRA terrorists made a deliberate choice to join a terrorist organisation. Their victims and families are worthy of justice, but their chance of getting this seems small. If they call it was a war, then Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness and Martin Ferris, who on February the 20th, 2005, the then Justice Minister of the Irish Republic, Mr Michael McDowell, publicly named as members of the IRA Army Council, should be hauled before the War Crimes Tribunal for their acts of brutal crimes against humanity. Some suggest that a Truth Commission should be enough to satisfy the innocent victims. Well, what would that achieve? When asked about the terrorist past, Gerry Adams looked into the camera and quietly, brazenly denied that he had ever been in the IRA. Martin McGuinness was exposed by the report into the events in Londonderry, but he told the Savile inquiry, "I wish to make it clear that I will not provide the inquiry with the identities of other members of the IRA on the 30th of January 1972 or confirm their role played by such persons whose names are written down or shown to me. As a Republican, I am simply not prepared to give such information." And yet that same person have the audacity and the cheek to welcome the 192 million report into Bloody Sunday, pointing the finger at soldiers while dismissing the findings of the same report in regard to his part that he was identified in Londonderry with having a submachine gun. Now they talk about prosecuting soldiers who put their necks on the line for the preservation of life in Northern Ireland, and yet these others are lauded, applauded worldwide. There will be no films made and documentaries for the Shankill bomb, as there was for other. Even though there has been bloody Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays, and they must never be forgotten by this House. But the question must be asked, why did the innocent have to die on Ulster soil? Was it because there was an acceptable level of violence, as he said? Or was it because, as a previous Prime Minister said, his government had no strategic interest in Northern Ireland? Let me finish by this, Madam Speaker. We do need closure, and we must not allow Republicans to rewrite history or romanticise their murderous campaign. No one can understand the nightmare that the people of Northern Ireland have been through, terrorising their kitchens and bedrooms while walking in the streets as they went to restaurants and hotels, or while worshipping in their churches, leaving their children in the morning and not knowing whether they'd ever come home or see them in the evening. We lived through that. It was reality. We need the truth. We need justice, and no one should be too high or mighty to escape the rule of law. Yes.